They're getting rid of Port Olisar. Thank you to my long-term subscribers for sticking around. Let's talk a little bit about the history of our long-term home for many of us and how there's going to be a brand new station, likely in the same spot, and it's going to be up to date with the newest conventions. And is that a good thing or a bad thing? And why they're doing it? Hint, it's the whole C. I'm not a fan of clickbait. So, for starters, let's hear from Todd Pappy himself on what the good parts of Port Olisar are.
I think that people like it just because it's get in, get out, and there's that kind of feel. There's no transit loops. There's nothing there that basically extends the timeline and the gameplay. And for the most part, it has all the shops the average person needs, armor shop, FPS shop. There's a ship item shop there as well. I think the initial implementation of Port Olisar, did everything that we needed it to do, checked all the boxes. But obviously, as the game has evolved and changed over time, we needed to adjust it. We've added medical gameplay, we've added cargo, and unfortunately, Port Olisar doesn't support any of those game loops, so it became apparent that we need to start investigating a way to change it or adjust it and bring it up to speed.
So suddenly, the fastest station around was not good enough. It didn't have the services needed for the future.
Seraphim Station is the official name for what we've been calling Olisar 2.0 internally for quite a while now. What we initially set out to do is to create this really grand space station with a really fantastic sense of scale that players could have a really good time flying in and around and also to and from shape languages that we could then use to come together for the final product. We were also working on lots of shape studies involving the silhouette of the station to make sure it was reminiscent of other stations and also to bring our own unique spin on it.
Start seeing the elements from other stations now being integrated into there. Do not let the rings trick you. This is a much larger station. CIG intends it to be a larger station, full of services and a food court and everything else that you are going to need. But that does come at the cost of longer distances to get to your ship.
It's much larger and much more extravagant than anything that we've done before in terms of our space station kit. But this is utilizing the kit in the way that we haven't before, and it's created much more unique identity for it than anything else, I think. I think the gameplay around it is going to be very cool, specifically just, seeing it for the first time, approaching it. There's multiple hangars, view rooms all over the station, providing you with, beautiful views of the planet at the right time of day. Extremely large station, probably 4 to 5 times bigger than Olisar. So we have everything that you could possibly need inside. It has various sets of hangars and habs in the center of the first 2 rings. And those are going to be where players are going to be landing their ships, collecting their ships, and the general gameplay that occurs over there. Then towards the back end of the ship, we have the cargo area, which is going to incorporate that gameplay as well. So this is how we sort of mixed and matched all of these together to create something a little bit more unique. We also have docking tubes and everything else that players could need to traverse along this big structure.
It has the medical clinic areas, it has cargo, everything there that's needed to support all of our careers that are being developed and growing.
I do contend that it is a little more unique than most other stations, aside from PO itself, which is radically different than virtually any other station in the game. But I hesitate to give them a CIG complete leeway here, because I look at this and I see a lot of familiar assets stacked in familiar ways, like the ship claiming elevators, where you can see the ASOP terminals and the ship claim elevators right on top of each other, and the food court and the clothing shops and everything else that are the same places that you would see in a lot of other locations. Now, they may have unique inventory in those places, like many places do, or have specific policies and rules, maybe like Hurston's planetary system has about weapons and such on the planet side. But I don't think so. I think this is just going to be a general location, and I kind of feel that this is going to be tied into a new player experience idea, where you can bring in players that are newer. It's a controlled environment on a brand new, well polished, massive station with everything they could possibly need. They spawn in hangars, so if they somehow don't have their helmet and their flight suit on, they still don't suffocate trying to get to their ship, which that was a big complaint. You don't have to worry about rammers and griefers as much because it's inside hangars for the main positions. And I also wonder if there's going to be landing sites like other stations have, where they allow you to rearm, refuel, repair without having to deal with the ATCs and without having to deal with an ASOP terminal storing and retrieving over and over again, instead just being able to hop out, get on an elevator, and go. So I'm very curious. I really hope they keep that old spirit that the other stations have.
The whole need for the station was that we're trying to have a focus on and introduce bounty gameplay into each station as much as we can. So each station also has a security dock integrated into it as well. That is going to be where all of the bounty gameplay is going to be happening, and you're going to be directed towards that.
I've long said that bounty gameplay is going to be critical for this game, especially to have a truly unique profession loop that is really different than many other gameplay loops. And also, it changes the tempo of combat from just kill, kill, kill to there may be reasons to capture people, bringing them to justice, and have that more satisfying gameplay, especially when it eventually is about players, other players you're trying to deal with. Additionally, having bounties, a bounty management system, having a way to put the bounty somewhere is going to be critical. Now, I think CIG still needs to figure out how player versus player bounty collection is going to actually operate. Like, once a player is captured, the biggest consensus by the community is basically they're going to have to figure out a way. Basically, that's an NPC now, and you just respawn at Clutcher or somewhere like that as the actual player. But other people have said, no, we should stick to the hardcore element ideas from the beginning, where that's the player until you go back, unless you backspace. So I'll be curious to see where this takes us. But this is the beginning of that. After all, we need this type of infrastructure to be in place. And it's not just going to be at Seraphim, the new PO. It's going to be across the system, as they noted, at the larger stations at least.
So the way that we set up our LEO stations, all of them are future-proofed and allow us to add new modules to them via our internal transit loop, and the way that we set up the object containers within the game and load. And this is also becoming future-proof for when we add new things to the station. Port Olisar, it was so small, there was no place to add or grow, and there was no transit loops so that we can fill and block off or open new loops to get to new areas. And with Seraphim, this allows us to continue that same thought process and to get everything that we need to give to the player in that area, either things that Ryzen is missing or things that Grimp Hex might be missing. This allows us to basically make sure that the player has a local area and a local space station to acquire anything that they might need. So as new careers come online, whether that be bounty hunter or exploration or other things, this opens new ways for us to actually go in and add new decks, new content. So Seraphim actually fixes all of that.
I think CIG needs to be more honest and just say, look, we cannot support this older technology. This is the new technology. We're going with it. It's that simple. Now, I have a lot of memories at PO. Not every one of them's positive. I can remember having trouble loading in and not having a default spacesuit and trying to have buddies park as close as possible to the protected walkway so I could run out and try not to suffocate getting to the ship. And most of the time it didn't work out. I can remember spawning on the wrong A, B, C, or D platform and then having to try to EVA across or get a ride or figure out what platform I'm on by going back inside or trying to jump around and stare for the big letters. It's not perfect, but it was quick and it was effective at what it did. And for the diehards, this is going to be a hard pill to swallow. So being very upfront about what PO is and what's going to happen to PO would be far more effective. Like, look, right in its place, we're going to put this station. It needs to have this transit loop. It needs to be modular. It needs to be, as Todd kept saying, future-proofed. This is what it is. And by the way, here's what we're doing with PO. If you're going to remove an iconic part of Star Citizen's history that's been with us for so long, the least you can do is say what you're going to do with it. I'm going to keep it at the end here, but basically they're like, we don't know what to do yet. We're thinking about it, but we're going to do something nice for it. And honestly, I think, and myself and many others feel, just put it in Pyro, put it in the Halo, put it somewhere that's practical for players to get to without a beacon, and that could be a nice little exploration / pirate hideaway, etc. It would be ironic that one of the first places for new players and for griefers and for pad rammers would turn into a place that's for people that can't be allowed in the system. Also, interesting little side note there that he mentioned about how Grimhex can't offer the service of bounty hunting. That's painfully obvious to anybody who knows Grimhex and their not so allegiance to the UEE and the advocacy in general. They're not exactly on the lawful side, so it would be kind of funny if Grimhex started supporting bounties of other pirates and other neutral parties and such. That would be a very interesting world to live in for sure. And maybe we need that. Maybe that would be a really fun thing for random, especially player pirates that just want to grief each other, to slap bounties on each other, and it's a self-solving problem. Who knows? But for now, we're sticking with the official system and an official lawfully good bounty, where you, just like you saw in the previous picture, the Cutlass Blue with its cryogenically frozen quarry, and you can fit quite a lot back there. I think it's 12 packages in the back of people that are bounty targets, and bring them out like they're Han Solo, carbonite frozen in Star Wars. So it'll be interesting to say the least. I think that this is one example, though, of just doing it for a Hull C, where you're literally just putting an orb in space, a box in space, and it's just this, oh, well, we're going to add this functionality. I think they could have did it for the old PO, but being able to include whole new platform areas or floors just for whole player professions, I think that's where you start showing where this can shine. So that was a good move by CIG to start pulling bounties in. I hope it makes it into 3.20 if they're bringing this into 3.20. So PO is launched at the same time turning in NPC bounties is placed at PO. That would be a very, very good idea by CIG, especially to help the community kind of ease into this new facility.
The Hull C is coming, and with the cargo decks and the gameplay that we needed to load the Hull C, we felt that this was the right time to introduce it to the game.
I don't think you can say it's better station than Port Olisar. I think like Port Olisar has become a monument to the players, and it's got its own value. That I think we try to honor that as much as possible, and I think we try to create our own take on that as much as possible. So I like to think that we ended up something that we're all very happy with. I wouldn't say it is better than Olisar, no.
In this first iteration of the Hull C, we have cargo yards that are just boxes in space, this hollow that appears when you get close to a station, and you can load and unload the Hull C there because it's just so big you can't literally land with it to unload the thing. And then it has a timer that appears. So I think it's kind of weak to say that we had to delete the most iconic station in the game just because, and replace it, of course, just because of the Hull C. I really hope that they bring the bounty concept out as well at the same time, but we'll see. We'll see. But in general, I am glad to see that there is new technology being progressed. I am glad to see the Hull C come in. I didn't want the Hull C to kill Port Olisar. That is a really weird thing, and I didn't have that on my bingo card for 2023 Star Citizen development.
So it will be the replacement, so to speak, for Olisar. Olisar is not going anywhere. We know what a historical thing it is for the players.
We will pay proper homage to it later. And we were trying to find ways to basically send it off. Obviously, I think if we did a new space station and just renamed it Port Olisar, the old Port Olisar that they loved then just goes away completely. But basically, for right now, we need to remove it, and then we'll be putting in Seraphim Station in its place, and then in the future, we'll talk about what we're going to do with Port Olisar.
CIG, this clip right here that you just said, your team should have ended with this. A respectful, we're going to find a way to end Port Olisar's career in a respectful way, maybe have it continue on and respect its legacy, etc., etc., etc. You should have ended with this. The silly little animation at the end, I literally cut it from this video because it is just, you can go watch it if you want. ISC, Behold Seraphim, of course it's in the link in the description below. Always, it's the source material, but you gotta walk a fine line here. You're replacing out of nowhere an iconic, beloved part of StarCitizen. Now, I say out of nowhere, but to be fair, the community knew as early as 3.10, 3.9, 3.11, like somewhere in that realm, we knew that Port Olisar was rumored to be on its way out, that maybe even the Van Duel incursions were going to be started by destroying PO, because there was literally animations that were previewing that idea in the past. And also the idea of when the Xeno threat came, ooh, they're going to lock down PO, they're going to take it out or damage it, and it's going to be a legacy thing forever. And there was already talk that it needed to be updated, and CIG was saying flat out, like, we would rather replace it. We'd rather replace it. Well, we're finally coming around the corner out of the 3.19, 19.1 patch cycle, and we're getting to 3.20, and one of the biggest things, aside from Arena Commander, which is a divisive topic to even start talking about, because about half the community is huge fans of Arena Commander, Star Marine, etc., and the other half is like, focus on PU, focus on PU, focus on PU. And so far, the big things from the PU side are the Hull C, which is, it's great. And then we're finding out, well, Hull C had to get rid of Port Olisar just to exist. And it's like, what? What? Where? Huh? Where? What? Why? And then you go and you put another animation of destroying PO. And the 10 telling us you have no idea what to do with it. So please, developers, if you ever listen to this, spend a few minutes, do some brainstorming. Honestly, the smartest move, I think, would be put it in Pyro in an unknown spot with no beacon, so it has to be found, and it's like a reward for people to find with limited services on board. Literally almost cut and paste the thing into place. Put some little comical things in there about like pirates that have tried to loot high voltage electric stuff, and people that like tried to set up like a little bar and restaurant inside mechanical spaces or something, like little entertaining things and their stories. That would be really cool. But other than that, I just leave it alone. You know, leave it as a historical thing that most of the time when you walk into those spaces, at the very least, have one of the of the A, B, C, D areas just like it was. So we can bring new community members back to the old PO and show them how we started out. The first steps we walked in Stanton, other than the hangar module with the little area you could drop through an elevator and go to this other thing. But other than that, the first actual with other players involved, legit Stanton adventures, I started on PO. And many others did too. And I spawned on those pads, and I flew off those pads many, many, many times. And I came back a busted bird, but you know what? I got back to those pads. And I got to tell you, it means a lot to me that it is still going to stay in the world, in the verse. And if it isn't in the PU, it doesn't, sadly, it doesn't exist to me. Yeah, it'd be cool. Don't get me wrong. I'll play kicking and screaming with some friends and org mates. I will play Arena Commander. I will when it's updated again. But even if it's sitting in there as a map, like as a surprise. I don't think that's a respectful way to send it off. That's fine as long as it's still in the PU somewhere, because that is what's going to last. That is your legacy. That is your true historical landmark. And you've done all the work. Port Olisar is a fine piece of art. And it's not a piece of art that you can look at and go, wow, that's beautiful. But you can look at it and value its utility. You can value its speed and efficiency. It is an incredible piece of equipment, and it got us as the community through many, many, many patch cycles. That's pretty cool to me. And while I do value the new R&R stations, I really wish that internal transit system, as Top Happy called it, I really wish that was more efficient, because I do have some complaints about how it takes so long to walk, physically run and walk back and forth between different locations to get to all these different decks. It feels a lot of times like it purposely moves things around to make them feel different in each station, but there's not enough markings that really explain where things are. And then when you finally do get there, this elevator goes to this platform, but it doesn't go to this one. And yes, they are marked and they do note where the cargo deck is, etc., etc. But it just feels unnaturally complex. Like, I feel like, some examples that I really wish CIG would go back to is modern cruise ships. Go to modern malls and take a look at the way they pathfind things and the way they have very simplistic markings, and they have internal transportation systems too. They have elevators, they have escalators. They figured this out. They've been working on this for decades. And also they have clean ways to get people in and out and egress them in and out through service corridors and emergency exits and other things that make it more practical for people. There should be a flow of both methodologies. And I feel like this is something that CIG could learn a thing or two from. Instead of thinking about it as everything should be an elevator or a tram, it should be, what is this elevator taking me to? And do I really feel like my time is being valued by going through these long walkways and exploring the station? The first time is exciting, but and they even cited that in the new Seraphim. It's like, oh, there's gameplay in exploring the station. Yes, the first time. Yes, maybe even the first couple times, or sharing it with somebody new to the game, or new to at least coming back to this patch cycle and seeing the station the first time. But after that, do I want to stay here? And once again, I go back to the hospitality industry, the commercial retail sector. Cruise ships are an excellent example because they have to value their space so much. And they make it comfortable. They make areas you want to exist in. Rooms, I'm treading carefully here because I'm not an expert in this space, but places should feel very comfortable, and it should feel like they flow into each other, like naturally. Like the food court, for example, should not be its own elevator system. And it should not be just attached to, oh, well, there's an armor shop next to a hot dog stand. Like there should be some type of natural flow where it's like, oh, I'm in the professional sector. This is what this is. And if I go over there, that's where the food is. If I go to my left, though, that's where all the clothing and fashion and professional services are for the like basically getting things like Platinum Bay and such for my ship. Like there should be different clear identified sectors. Color coded, for example, would be a very easy way to do this. Platinum Bay is very well done only because it's got that really specific blue color that gives it away everywhere it is. It has such good brand awareness. And maybe that's another thing to explore, is putting color and brand awareness that's better across the board. And don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to say that food courts on the stations aren't cool. I understand the lore and the aspect of people are used to being stuck in a deep space, having places that feel comfortable, having places that have amazing light shows above your head and such are pretty dang neat. And I probably, if I was on a station for a long time, I would certainly value those things. I think one of the coolest examples of that is not station side, but planet side over on Microtech, where you literally have grassy areas inside the commons, and you're walking around like, foliage in a frozen tundra that you normally live in, and people are practicing yoga and lifting weights and running, jogging through it and stuff. That's perfect. So take that same level of just spending a little bit of time and thinking it through, looking at your ideas, and making places that people actually want to spend time in. And I honestly think Seraphim will be a big miss if it's not org friendly. Org friendly meaning the largest ships can dock there and they want to dock there. One of the things to think about is the location in the system is not ideal because it's not centralized to everything, but it's not a terrible spot. It's not like it's all the way out at Microtech. And it's not all the way out on the edge of the system like out there. You have a place that's relatively centralized, depending on where the planet is spinning at that moment, and relatively ideal for that. But it's not the perfect spot, but it's good enough. And then you have to sit there and go, okay, what services does it have? Is it a practical station? Can the enemy camp us here if we have another org that's mad at us? Or MPV, if we're doing large PvE content with lockdowns and xenothreats and such, is this going to be a problem for us here? Is there going to be an enemy PvE Idris that can camp us in the station? And now all of a sudden, all our org ships and our fleets are worthless. So I'd like to see how this station performs. I'd like to see how it handles a large group of people trying to form up a fleet, say 30 or 40 players across at least a dozen ships. So I mean, if you're talking about future-proofing CIG, this is the type of future-proofing you really need to look into and carefully consider. And honestly, how often do you have a chance to literally redo a redo on one of the largest and most iconic stations in the entire game, and in a system that point blank is critical to the game? It's the only system we have right now. And even when Pyro's in, Pyro is going to be a frontier land of lawlessness and money making and risk taking and such. Not exactly the place for an established org to have like their headquarters in. More of a place for them to go on excursions to. At least my perspective, take that what you will. I'm sure some orgs will be like, well, actually, we got a Carrick. We already got plans to do this, and this. And okay, fair enough. But most people, you're thinking of most of the community. And once again, those community groups that are building themselves into these orgs now for the future you're saying you're future proofing for. So don't just think of the player, think of the org and how they're going to handle it. So one of these decks really should have future org office areas, should have org hangar concepts, or at the very least, stuff you can hang that on and say, look, we don't have this yet, but here is where we would put that. Here is where we would plan that through. Or here is this, here literally right here, decks 2 and 3, they're reserved for the future of org operations. So just some thoughts I had. Once again, this has actually been a pretty fine little video. I just wish they gave PO a little more respect and they had an end game for PO already planned out, because they've had so long they clearly wanted it gone, and they have clearly going to replace it. And I hope they give it a proper send off. If you made it this far, thank you for sticking around. Drop a comment below. Did I miss something? What do you think of the loss of PO? Is this a big step forward without the pad griefing, with better services in that area, especially, right above a large planetary landing location? That can't be ignored. Landing location on a planet. I'm using air quotes there because it's up in the high atmo, but still, it's there, dang it. So yeah, thanks again, and I wish y'all a wonderful night.